Good evening. You're watching The Digital Age. I'm Jim Zirin. Tonight we have a special program on a subject which has consumed our national interest over the past weeks and months, namely the conflict between foreign investment in the United States and national security, the ports deal. Most of you are familiar with the background of the transaction. DP World, which was an agency of the government of Dubai, one of the 7 Arab Emirates, proposed to acquire a British company which was responsible for terminal and port operations at 6 United States locations. Dubai and the United Arab Emirates, of which it's a part, had a lamentable record on terrorism. Indeed, 2 of the 19 9/11 hijackers, including the pilot of one of the planes which crashed into the World Trade Center, were citizens of the Emirates. The transaction was reviewed by a special committee, an interagency committee known as the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, which considered all of the relevant factors, including national security, and cleared the transaction. Subsequently, however, there was a firestorm of public protest over the ownership of critical infrastructure by Dubai, and Congress got into the act. Eventually, as you recall, DP World withdrew from the transaction and said that a United States entity would take over the operation of the ports. So that gives rise to our question as we examine the fallout from Dubai's withdrawing from the ports transaction. And the question is, did cratering the ports deal hurt our country? And here to discuss it with us is an expert in international trade. Bill Reinsch is a former Undersecretary of Commerce in the Clinton administration, and he is now president of the National Foreign Trade Council, a Washington trade association which represents large United States multinationals. He testified before the House Financial Services Committee in favor of approving the proposed takeover. Bill Reinsch, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, what will killing this deal cost the United States, Bill?
I think in the short run, it will cost us some investment. It's hard to predict because the people that will turn away from us aren't going to stand up and give press conferences announcing that they're not going to invest. A year or two, we'll look back and see some things that probably didn't happen as a result. My organization actually, I think, is more concerned, Jim, about the adverse effect it'll have on the president's ability to accomplish his foreign policy goals in the Middle East and in the war on terrorism. Dubai and the UAE, and you're right, its pre-9/11 record was not a good one. Its post-9/11 record has been better, and one of the reasons that the administration has defended the deal was on the grounds that the UAE and this company both have been cooperating in the war against terrorism in a whole variety of ways, cooperating with our military, cooperating with our intelligence services, and cooperating with our financial services, people trying to follow the money trail. And the UAE is an important place.
Was there a concern that that cooperation might be lessened as a result of this rebuff?
I think there is a concern in the administration that it will be lessened, and that matters. It matters in the war on terrorism, and it matters in the president's larger effort to create a Middle East free trade agreement or Middle East free trade area, which we think is a good idea because it will produce jobs and economic growth in the Middle East, which we think is good for peace. And we right now are in the middle of negotiations with the UAE, which just got postponed. I think not as a direct result of this, but it makes you a little worried about the future.
Certainly didn't help.
It doesn't help, and it's going to set those goals back. Are they going to stop cooperating with us? I mean, I don't think so. But you can't help but wonder if maybe the cooperation might be a little bit less, or they're going to start probably putting their eggs in more than one basket.
Now, of course, the Emirates is a Gulf state. It's right there at the Straits of Hormuz. It's probably a chip shot across the Gulf to Iran.
It is.
And we have diplomats in Dubai and other Emirate states who are concentrating on Iran and trying to see what we can do with respect to the reform of the regime there. So this is very central to our foreign policy goals, isn't it?
It is, and it is also an important stopping point for our fleet. The Fifth Fleet is based in Bahrain, but they put in a lot at UAE ports, and probably more there than any other port in the region. And so that kind of military-to-military cooperation has been an important element for us, too.
So is it a fact that United States warships are being serviced in
I believe so, that's right, yes.
And so right now they're servicing and operating American installations quite apart from this deal, isn't that right?
Yes, well, DP World, which is the port company, operates all over the world, loads cargo all over the world, and one of the things that came out in the debate over the deal was the Department of Homeland Security, which has Customs and Border Protection in it now, saying that one of the key things they try to do is get cooperation from the terminal operators, not just in the States, but in Hong Kong, in Rotterdam, in Singapore, everywhere ships are being unloaded for shipment to the U.S., and the DP World has been a very successful cooperator with us in establishing better port security in those other places.
I think that after the Singaporeans, DP World is the second largest terminal and port operator in the world. And they're now in charge of a number of terminals through which goods and containers are shipped to the United States. Isn't that right? I
think that's right. And from an American security standpoint, I would much rather have this stuff stopped before it's unloaded, rather than have it sail into U.S. port and be literally a ticking time bomb. That's why Customs and Border Protection have spent so much time trying to get these companies to cooperate and trying to get foreign governments to cooperate and trying to station Americans out there in these ports so we can provide better security at the front end so we don't have to worry about it quite so much at the back end.
Yes, because it's a misperception, is it not, that we're inspecting containers after they arrive in this country. The centerpiece of our security policy is to try to do offshore inspection at the point of lading or loading of the containers on board.
We've done a much better job in the last 5 years of keeping track of containers. We've developed a computerized system that attempts to track the progress of each container as it moves around the world, and we've had some success at that. We are still only actually opening and physically inspecting, I think, less than 5% of containers that come in. Now, we don't have the physical resources to inspect 100%, and we probably don't need to. There are, however, advanced detection equipment devices that Hong Kong has, for example, which we're not using, that can scan each container as it moves through. You can also do a lot of work with paperwork, manifest documents, and with trained investigators, which we have, you can learn a lot from looking just at the paper by picking out which containers are problematic and which are not.
Yeah. Now, Stephen Flynn, who's appeared on this show, is now with the Council of Foreign Relations and is a former Coast Guardsman and an expert in port and container security, has said that the state of security at our ports is woefully inadequate, and he would like to see the Hong Kong model transferred to all of the terminals all over the world. I think he said so in testimony before Congress.
Yes.
And do you recall what the cost of that might be?
I think he said it was $1.5 billion,
which is relatively small, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's cheap. And what's interesting is that we haven't done it here. And I think he's right. I think port security is a problem. We have never thought that ownership of the company that operates the terminals is the determinative factor in port security, but you can't deny that you've got gaps along the way, and he's made some good recommendations in a number of areas to fix them.
Now, it's been highly publicized that American multinationals invest abroad. We invest in China, certainly Boeing, GE invest in the Arab states, sell them airplanes and sell them other materials and supplies. It has not gotten much fanfare that over the past 50 years there's been substantial foreign investment in the United States. Isn't that right?
That's correct. I don't have numbers for you, Jim, but there's a lot of foreign investment of many kinds. First of all, portfolio investment, buying government bonds and government paper has been a huge means of recycling dollars that China and Europe and Japan in particular have accumulated as a result of our trade deficit. You've also seen growing equity investment here, foreign companies buying American firms. One last year that created some controversy was when Lenovo, a Chinese computer company, bought IBM's laptop division. They didn't buy IBM. In fact, since I think 75% of the world's laptops were already being made in China, this wasn't a big step forward. But it was a significant purchase to have a Chinese company buying an American brand in a big way. There's Daimler Chrysler. I mean, there's a whole set of obvious acquisitions like that. But then even more than that, from a job perspective, there are numerous companies, Volvo, Michelin, Siemens, ABB, all foreign companies that have substantial physical investments in the United States and employ thousands of workers in the United States manufacturing things.
So it's a great economic advantage to us when foreign companies come here and invest.
For 200 years, we have been an economy that welcomed foreign investment. In the beginning, we didn't have any money. All the big companies were somewhere else. We've invited them here, and we've thrived as a result of them being here.
One of there have been a number of examples. There's the Japanese wanted to buy part or all of Rockefeller Center. They wanted to buy in the 80s when they had the real estate bubble. They wanted to buy the Pebble Beach golf course. I think the Australians recently bought the Indiana toll roads. Are there any other examples that you know of?
Pebble Beach and Rockefeller Center are the big ones. You'll see some more of those. I mean, we're dealing with kind of a big economic reality here, which is there are billions of dollars floating out of this country every year because we're buying so many imports. So what are the foreigners going to do with their dollars? They're not going to stuff them in their mattresses. Eventually, those dollars come back here in the form of the different kinds of investment we were just talking about, and they will come back sometimes in the form of purchases of marquee companies. We went through a whole wave of paranoia about this in the late 80s because of Rockefeller Center, because of Pebble Beach, and then what we discovered is the Japanese had a wonderful tendency to buy high and sell low. They lost a lot of money. The air began to go out of their economy. We stopped worrying about it. Now, actually, if you put the current case aside, what we tend to be more worried about is the Chinese. You know, look at several different episodes last year. IBM Lenovo, which was a successful acquisition.
You mentioned that, yes.
CNOOC and Unical, which was not a successful acquisition.
Now tell us about that. Unical had oil assets which were almost entirely in Asia, isn't that right?
Yes, oil and gas largely in Indonesia, but in several other places too.
And I guess they did have some rare earth operations, which might have been a source of concern, but it was largely Asian oil assets. Now, what was the objection to the Chinese acquiring them?
Well, there were several objections that were put out, and it never got to be a government issue because the shareholders of Unical ended up voting to sell the company to Chevron, which made the CFIUS question moot. But this one, in contrast to DP World, which sort of arrived late in the decision-making day, CNOOC arrived very early, well before there was even anything for CFIUS to look at. People were opposing a possible sale. The grounds were several. One was that this rare earth mine that Unical owned, which had produced minerals that had national security implications, and did we want that to be owned by the Chinese, even though the mine was in the United States, the mine wasn't going to move. Second was the fact that there is a variety of sophisticated oil exploration equipment which has weapons of mass destruction applications, has to do with sonar and listening equipment. That there was a concern, there wasn't a concern, there were questions. Does Unical have this technology? Do the Chinese not have it? I mean, if they already have it, it's not really an issue. If they don't have it, would they acquire it? Do we care? That was a set of issues that wasn't answered. And then finally was simply the fact that the Chinese have adopted a policy of not just buying another barrel of oil, but buying production capabilities for oil and gas. Does it matter if they start locking up production? And one side said no, because it's a fungible product. If they lock it up here with Unical, that just means there's somewhere else where we can buy it. Other people said, well, that's true if supply and demand are roughly equal. If you see a world with rapidly rising demand, and you see that with India and China right now, demand going up very much. This is one reason why we're at $60 a barrel. For energy, yeah. Demand for energy. And you see flat supply, at least in the low term. You may get, in the short term, you may get different market activities, hoarding and favoring certain customers, namely your national customers. So that was the sort of the large economic concern. None of that ever got settled because the shareholders sold the company to the Americans and not to the Chinese.
By the way, when you were in the government, did you sit with CFIUS?
Yes. One of the things that my bureau did at the Commerce Department was the research that Commerce did for the CFIUS cases as they came along, and we had some difficult ones as well, none quite like DP World. The ones that we had were really the kind that CFIUS was intended to deal with when it was written in the 80s, which was cases where you're going to transfer key pieces of technology overseas, because you can't get that back. If you're going to give the Chinese or somebody else that you may or may not trust something irrevocably, you want to think about it carefully. You know, say what you want about the ports. The ports are going to stay here. You know, nobody's going to put the terminal on a barge and ship it off to Dubai. The asset is here, and as long as the asset is here, from a traditional security perspective, which is sort of military, our ability to defend ourselves, that's not really something you worry about. If, for example, and there's another one of these coming up, a UAE company trying to buy a U.S. company that makes aircraft parts, that one will probably be looked at fairly closely. You know, aircraft, at one level, civil aircraft, you know, we sell lots of 747s and 777s and 57s all over the world all the time. But the jet engine technology, particularly the hut section of jet engine technology, which is also used in jet fighters, is a highly protected, highly classified technology. So engine technology, if that goes on the block, and if these people are making engine parts, and I don't know that they are, but if they are, that one will be looked at fairly closely, because that's serious stuff.
By the way, is there a political component to CFIUS? It's an interagency group. It consists of, I think it's headed by Treasury. They're representatives of other agencies. And the committee, it's at the sub-cabinet level, so that there is no requirement of sign-off by any cabinet member. Isn't that
well,
right?
It's a two-step process.
Yeah.
The first 30 days is a sub-cabinet, career-level, bureaucratic examination of whether there are any issues. Most of the time, they don't find any issues. Of the 2,500 or so cases that have been notified, I think that's too many. Well, yeah, that's about right. Of the 2,500 cases that have been notified to CFIUS in the entire life of the statute, which goes back to '88, only about 25, 26 have gone to the second stage, which is a formal 45-day investigation of the issues that are raised. Now, that sounds like a small number. In fact, it's not that high a bar. If an agency has a problem, chances are it goes to the 45 days, and the agency takes the lead and runs out its problem and talks to the company. Of those 25 that have gone that far, those 25 then end up in the president's desk for the most part. I mean, it does get to the political level at that stage.
Has the president ever overruled CFIUS?
Yes. The president has blocked a transaction in one case, and that was the senior President Bush in 1990. It was a Chinese attempt to purchase an American company that made aircraft parts, some other things, in Washington State. The president, CFIUS sends a recommendation. I can't think of a case where the president has overruled the recommendation, largely because the White House is involved at that stage in making sure that the recommendation is one the president will accept. Most of the time, what happens, though, is not yes, approve it, or no, don't approve it. Most of the time, there's a negotiation with the company. And somebody will say, Homeland Security or Defense will say, well, we have a problem. I mean, I can give you an example. In the IBM Lenovo case, for example, and I can't talk too much about this, but the issue, nobody cared about the technology that Lenovo was buying. That the Chinese already had that. There were some people who cared about other technology that IBM was continuing to own that was next door to the facility the Chinese were taking over, literally next door, down the street. And the concern was expressed, well, are the Chinese going to be able to sneak across the street and steal this other technology that we care about? They weren't buying it. It was a question of an illegal activity. Well, that's really a firewall issue. You know, that's, can you put in key card access? Can you put locks on your doors and windows? Can you make sure that their engineers and the Chinese engineers don't have lunch together? Can you separate the parties? So then you have a
Chinese wall.
A Chinese wall, very good. So you have a negotiation.
Yeah.
And what that came out down to, were IBM and Lenovo willing to spend the money to create the Chinese wall? And they were, and so the transaction was approved, subject to conditions that are never made public. But they were those kinds of conditions.
Now, what happened with DP World? How far did that get?
Well, that never got beyond the first 30 days because nobody had an issue. Homeland Security looked at it and thought that ownership was not the key issue for port operators. The Defense Department decided they had no issue. Nobody had an issue, so it didn't go to the investigation.
I have no problem. But didn't it seem like a colossal political misstep on the part of the president when you see this firestorm that erupted in Congress? You're putting the fox in charge of the hen house, and
sure,
what's going on? Dubai, these terrorists are going to be operating our ports?
Sure, but hindsight's 20/20. I mean, that's easy to say now. At the time, I mean, this deal was announced in October sometime. The filing was in December. All this time in November, December, January, nobody says a word. This is public information. And it creates a dilemma for the career bureaucracy. Politics is not supposed to be part of this. It's supposed to be a merit-based decision.
Do you think that's good or bad?
I think it's good. I think that's the way it's supposed to be.
You wouldn't advocate revising CFIUS or the standards that CFIUS applies to these transactions?
I think there are some changes that wouldn't be bad, but I don't. I think the system operates all right. What this issue demonstrated was that certainly Treasury, which is the chair, is tone deaf politically. I mean, as this thing makes its way through, it doesn't just stay at the career level. Somebody is telling political level officials, well, hey, this week we're working on this one. Next week we're going to be working on this one. So people at the political level are supposed to know that this is going on. And you're right. I mean, somebody should have said, wait a minute, this one is, somebody's antenna should have gone up and said, this one needs to be examined a little bit more carefully.
How would this look in the Washington Post? Or how would this look on CNN?
Well, that question was not asked.
Yeah. Now, what has been the aftershock of this? I mean, this has damaged Bush's prestige to a tremendous extent, has it not? It's
done several things. I mean, in terms of domestic politics, it's been a windfall for the Democrats because the Democrats have found an issue where they can accuse the president of being soft on security.
Even though Bill Clinton was retained by the government of Dubai to promote the ports.
Yeah, I don't put much. Well, he was. I don't know that he was retained. I think basically the emir called him up and asked him for advice, and they know each other as well they should, given his presidency, and I'm sure he gave him some advice, but. The Democrats have discovered something they can beat Bush over the head about. The Republicans, who, in my opinion, have always had a better instinct for self-preservation than the Democrats have had, are not going to be to the left of the Democrats on a security issue. So they're running to pile on as well. So they're all trying to out-tough each other on this issue. That may lead to some changes being made in CFIUS that are unwise. We'll see. There are bills being written literally as we speak. The damage, longer damage, the bigger damage is to our image, particularly in the Middle East. Anybody that knows this field and area does not believe that terminal operator ownership is a deciding factor in security issues. Everybody knows there are port security issues that are legitimate that we haven't paid enough attention to. And we look, a year from now, a lot of people are going to be embarrassed about this, and they're going to look back and say, what were we thinking? Right now, we just have to live through it, but there's going to be damage control that we're going to have to deal with.
I just wanted to address for a moment the xenophobia issue, the fear of foreigners, which seems to exist in the country. The United States Chamber of Commerce on March 9th warned Congress, quote, not to allow pockets of public hysteria to stifle future foreign investment in the country, while the security of the American people and our critical infrastructure must always be a top priority. Implementing laws that could harm the health of our economy in the name of national security would be a grave mistake. Now, you would agree with that, would you not?
Yeah, I think we signed that letter too, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. And so is there something that should be done about this? I mean, are you initiating a public awareness campaign so that people will accept the Australians owning the Indiana Toll Road and realize that this is part of globalization?
One reason I came to talk to you
Yes.
is to get the word out. One reason I testified is to do that. Well, yesterday, a group of associations, including the Chamber and us and others, sent a set of principles up to Congress about how we think this process ought to operate. But a lot of it is just standing up, talking sense about the way the world operates. You know, this is not America at its finest. This is a country that for years has thrived and become a great country by taking in smart people from all over the world. My mother, my grandfather, probably ancestors of yours. We are here because this is a country that welcomes foreigners and have made them part of ourselves.
Franklin Roosevelt addressed the daughters of the American Revolution as my fellow immigrants.
Exactly. There aren't very many people who can't say that they were immigrants. Right now, though, there's a world competition for talent. And if we enter into a period of xenophobia and hysteria about foreigners and start regarding everybody as a terrorist, you know, basically what we're doing is taking our greatest asset, you know, the smart people of the next generation, and sending them somewhere else. The tragedy of DP World is what the message we gave to the Middle East was, look, here is a government that since 9/11 has cooperated with us on the financial front, has cooperated with us on the terrorism front, has cooperated with us on the military front and on the political front, and we're telling them we're not going to make any distinction between you and your neighbors that haven't cooperated with us. We're going to call you all terrorist-supporting countries.
And we need them for Iran.
Yeah, we need you in Iran. We need you in Iraq. Why? The message to these Arab countries is, why should we cooperate if you're going to treat us like the ones that don't cooperate? It's going to take the president a long time to get over that hump.
And I think the figure is that about 80% of our ports are operated by foreign entities anyway.
Including the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, as I recall, as well as the Europeans.
Now, what's going to happen now? Is it going to be business as usual? I mean,
nothing
we lost
simple.
the port deal. What's going to happen?
Well, the immediate, the political attention in Washington, I think, is going to turn to CFIUS reform. The people that they use the ports deal to say that we ought to have CFIUS reform. In fact, there was a movement for reform last fall as a result of the CNOOC episode. There are multiple bills out there. There was one introduced yesterday by the committee that has jurisdiction over Homeland Security. The Banking Committee, which is the committee that has jurisdiction now over current CFIUS, that chairman in the Senate has already announced he's going to introduce his own bill and take it up next week in committee. The House leadership has announced that they're going to introduce their own bill. There's going to be a parade of bills. And a big debate over what to do.
Unfortunately, it's time to wrap up. This has been really fascinating. So I have a question for you, Bill Reinsch. Did killing the ports deal hurt the country?
I think so, yes, short-term and long-term.
Bill Reinsch, thank you so much for coming by.
A pleasure.
And thank you for coming by. I am Jim Zirin. Tune in next week for more from the digital age. Good night.